number 128, The Power of the Split Second. I'm Kathleen Wiley, a Jungian psychoanalyst, and I'm here with Deborah Henson-Conant, a mentor, composer, coach, terrific and fantastic entertainer and person, and we both play the harp, and that's why we call this Jung at Harp. So we've been looking at this juxtaposition between who we are and how we experience ourselves that isn't necessarily the whole truth of who we are, and in fact may have a lot of falseness and limit us. And we're talking about how is it that we begin to make a choice. First of all, how do we even see it? Then what do we do once we see it? So Deborah, do you want to chime in here?
Well, it's really interesting because just when you were saying what you just said, I was thinking, oh, everything keeps kind of tracing back for me to the golden cage, even though that's not what I was thinking of talking about today, but where the two characters are one who is searching for something that is elusive that he can't find, and the other character is someone who is stuck inside of something that she can't get out of. And and what happens in the very middle of the show is there's a moment of where they make the choice to experience trust, and that changes everything. And it's not like I knew that when I wrote the show, but I discovered it years after writing the show, like when I was asking what is the thing that makes the difference. And it was that moment, that split second, which creates a state change. So it's not like they had to practice it or they do whatever. It literally was this split second where everything switched. And it's not like they started being like, oh, I trust you, and oh, I'm trustworthy. The opposite happened. They trusted each other. They acted like they trusted each other less. The one character acted far less trustworthy, and yet they were galloping towards transformation, even though it looked like the opposite. So that's kind of been in my mind. And yet we've also, you and I have been talking about the split seconds where we hate ourselves, where we reinforce a false narrative about ourselves. And this is all coming up in the context of musicality, because I've been talking to members of the Academy about how to play with musicality, especially if one has been brought up in an Academy environment where it was all about just play the music, do it exactly the way the composer told you to, blah, 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 blah. Whereas I am teaching people in the Academy to take my music, break it apart, learn the concepts, and be able to take it and make it their own at their level. So the opposite of that. And so we were talking about a particular piece, which happens to be a piece that I wrote, and somebody's learning it. Oh, yeah. And they were asking about how to create musicality in it, because they did a recording of it and they just felt it was just too fast. And so we were all talking together about musicality, and we came up with the idea of, being able to listen to what you're doing, the difference between just playing it and actually listening to each note. So each note is new. There's that experience of actually being present in the moment. And that's a decision to make every moment. And the person that was asking about this actually, got on and was playing it. And you could literally see the moment when she switched between listening to what she was doing and then going to this sort of default mode of like, well, I'm just going to play it. And, anyway, so it's very present in my mind that we are constantly making those choices in these split seconds.
Right.
And so we started talking about this, and I asked, like, and then I'm seeing these in the reading that I'm doing. There's default mode, there's the already always, there's the collective consciousness, and then there's the individuation. So Kathleen, could you talk about this?
Yeah, I have so many thoughts. And by the way, for those of you who are joining in live, you may already realize this is a conversation. We don't come with answers, but we come with questions. So if you want to chime in with your thoughts and musings, we would love to hear from you. And you can add those hopefully in as a chat on the whatever program you're watching us on. Part of what I was thinking about my own experience sometimes playing the harp. And this tends to happen for me more when I'm by myself. And it's as if I just am so totally there in the moment with the music. And sometimes it's so beautiful, I stop playing. I mean, it's like I hear something and it just takes me somewhere. And I realize that I stop playing. And it's good I don't make my living as a professional harpist. I'd have to get over that. But I think you're talking about something that does have to do with trusting that all of the resources within me, all of the foundation of who I am, and in this case, who I am as a harpist, is there. And I'm moving from it as I flow with the music, you know, and that's a very different experience than trying to get it right and playing and being worried about every note and are my fingers going to land on the right string. And that happens split second after split
Right.
second after split second. It's not like, I mean, I can set that intention at the start of playing the piece, but, we all know how the mind works. Constant bombardment. I mean, it's not like just because I set that intention, nothing else is going to show up. So I have to be able to
Right.
stand with myself and anyway, that's part of
Well,
where my
as you're speaking, what's coming to my mind is, first of all, sensuality, and and the fear of sensuality. I'm speaking of
Mhm,
my own fear, and how that shows up. And you're also reminding me of something my teacher Tony, who was a mime, so a physical eloquent, spoke of physical eloquence, and that he always spoke of being a victim of your own work.
mhm,
It was a strange, word, a difficult word to deal with, but he I think he meant what you just said, that you're playing, and that in fact you allow yourself to be impacted by what you're playing. And I remember one of the biggest challenges I ever had in my life was to play the Nightingale, my piece, The Nightingale,
mhm,
because I felt that there was no place to hide. It was,
mhm,
and I was pretty much had learned to hide behind bravado, whether it was physical bravado or, playing fast or coming up with, and to just be, and to just be able to play it simply, and to be able to
mhm,
sing it simply, like, who will sing for the nightingale
mhm,
when the night is gone, when the daylight comes,
mhm,
to allow that. And I remember I was working with, I think it was Doc Severinsen or Marvin Hamlish or somebody who was like a celebrity conductor and I remember him saying, stop doing anything to this song.
mhm,
Get out of the way. And
mhm.
he said, play it and sing it like a
Right,
child.
right.
And it was
Mhm,
terrifying to me. And yet over time it's become, I've begun to trust that I can do that, that I can allow myself to experience and maybe even indulge, I don't know, that in images, as I sing
mhm.
it. But that journey it was a journey of vulnerability.
Well, I would say the images would inform you. I mean, you said indulge in the images, but I think the playing of It makes me think. I recently, this is a little side trip, but I learned the Waltz of the Little Girls. And when I was learning it, the B part, I was having such a hard time with the timing. And one day as I was listening to it, I thought, oh, it's a carousel. Here's the merry-go-round with the horses going up and
Mm,
down. And
mm.
as soon as I felt that up and down in my body, I had it. And so now when I play it, that's what I see in my mind. And recently, John and I played for some people, and for some reason, when we got ready to do that song, I shared that, and afterwards, the people, two or three people said, "I could see the merry-go-round when you were playing that. They could feel that." So anyway, that's
Okay, no, I think this is a really big deal because I think that we are, uh, it's okay, that we are choosing to do that or choosing not to do that all the time. Because it sounds like what you did is you embodied that image and you played with that image and that image came through. And I do believe that we are having an image of ourselves that is coming through all the time, loud and clear. And I remember talking to my friend Karen Montanaro, Tony's wife, and us saying, we get up there on stage and we think, you're looking at me do this thing, but really what you're seeing is where I'm at with
yeah.
everything I'm scared of. And I'm sharing that when I'm up on stage, and you see it in my body and you see it in, whatever. So and I think we're doing this constantly
Yeah.
all the time. So when we were talking about this and we were talking about that split second of
Yeah.
decision, that split second of trust, and I think one of the reasons, we chose to write it as split second is that it is a split second and another split second and another split second and another. In the golden cage, the split second happens, and even though it appears that everything is not acting in a trusting way, that split second changes everything afterwards. And I think it, and I'm curious, does that split second of trust, maybe, okay. I'm trying to think of like why it is that I can have a split second of trust or a feeling of, I'll be listening to something and I'll have like an epiphany, and then it just goes away and I come back to my old self. So what is that?
Well, from a Jungian perspective, we would say that split second of trust didn't have enough holding power to settle into consciousness, so it slipped back into the unconscious. It's like people who often have a numinous experience or a spiritual experience, they have it, but there's just not enough energy for that to root in consciousness. This is where our choice and our intention makes a difference. And we were talking about that as we were talking about the power of the split second, like this choice that we make in the split second, like the choice I make to stick with seeing the merry-go-round instead of wondering what that loud boom was I heard in the background, or,
Mm, mm,
going off in other images. But, I can't help but think about trust and foundation and simplicity. Because when you were talking about the Nightingale and Marvin
mm,
Hamlish or Doc Severinsen saying to
right.
you, quit doing anything to this, get out of the way. And then I think about foundations of a house and how simple a foundation is. I mean, there's nothing glamorous looking. There's not, I mean, there's, depending on the footprint of the house, the foundation may have more ins and outs, but foundations are they're very simple aesthetically from my perspective. Somebody else might disagree. There's something about the simplicity, the nakedness, the just being where we are with all we are, that I think is part of that ability and power of the split second to help us step into more of who we are, which is what happens in that moment in the golden cage where Althea decides to trust Boris.
Hmm.
And Boris goes with it. Boris trusts what Althea says to him. He has this moment of, should I really do this? And he says, but she said this. So he trusts her desire, just like she trusts his intention. although
Mm.
maybe there's other sides to it.
And for anybody wondering what we're talking about, if you go to goldencagemusical.com, goldencagemusical.com. This is a musical that I've been writing my whole life and it just completed in 2021, I think, or 2020. And then we performed it in New York in 2022, and it's come out as a film in 2023. So anybody can access it. I'll see if I can put a link up.
Okay.
Let's see where it is. I think this is it. I think this is the thing. So it's
Okay.
goldencagemusical.com. So you can come back to that. So anyway, yeah, go on, Kathleen. I just wanted to kind of reference people.
Well, I just was having several thoughts coming together about the simplicity of that moment of trust,
Mm-hmm.
and that trust that comes from standing with all of what is coming to bear in a particular moment of time. Um,
Well,
and that the images that we have, the image, that the old distorted image that limits falsely, and then this image that comes out of the desire for of more, the desire to live more of our largesse.
um, or I'm thinking more self-expression. I mean, I
Okay.
know that
Yeah.
people, I know that people, well, that is largesse. That is
That is
sharing
largesse.
ourselves more. And I'm thinking that people who come to Hip Harp Academy, they're coming there to get beyond the page and beyond their limitations.
Uh-huh.
And I'm thinking that one of the things that I do all the time now is create a snippet for people to play. It's a little tiny elemental, fundamental part of
Mhm.
music, a foundational part of music. We learn one every week, a new, and now I'm seeing people create music with those. But you're also making me think that when I first, I created the Nightingale. It's pretty complex. It's simple and yet complex. And I remember that when I was teaching, I teach these classes are like beyond the page, where I'm breaking things down to their fundamentals. And I remember breaking and always thinking, if you only had one finger on each hand, or even just one finger, how would you play this? And looking at the fundamentals of that is da 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 dee, da, da, and that you could still have all the self-expression. No, and now I'm thinking, like, okay, like I look at dog, I'm running all the time out on the bike path, and I see dogs, and I'm really struck by the fact that every dog, whether it's a tiny dog or a big dog, has the same amount of dog in it. And and so there's complete and utter self-expression. A larger dog isn't more self-expressed as a dog. And so this way of playing it, da da dee, is uh, can be fully self-expressed. This da da da
Yeah.
can be fully self-expressed. So what's that split second decision between this is enough and that's not enough, this is what it's supposed to be like?
You said it a few minutes ago, and I wrote it down. It's allowing yourself to be impacted. That the power of the split second is that we allow ourselves to be impacted instead of having this agenda of what it's supposed to be and just running roughshod over ourselves and all of what's coming back to us, whether it's what's coming back to us from our heart or coming back to us from another person. So allowing ourselves to be impacted, which does, I believe, and I think this is very true psychologically, it means slowing down. It means making room for self reflection, which means psychologically listening to the depths of one's own nature. And I think musically, it means listening to the music inside of one that one wants to play, listening to the music of the harp or your instrument as it
Okay,
speaks.
I totally agree with you, and I'm just gonna throw a fly in this ointment here because I wanna ask something. Because I love this. I love the idea. This just pulls everything together. You allow it to be enough. You listen to
Mhm.
its enoughness, or you experience its enoughness. You know, um, and I love to do stuff that's fast and, like, okay, like oh, you can't, like, sorry, you can't really see my hands. Let me just do that again.
Yeah.
Like that's like, oh, that's fun. Okay, now, and it took, and I work on this every time I practice. It's taken me years. I had this idea. I wanted to be like this. I saw this guy play a guitar in a certain way one day. I wanted to do that. I wanted to do that. Like a kid is like, you see some other kid do something. I want to do it. Okay, those are two different things. On the other hand, I was able to pretend that I could do it immediately. So, in a very short amount of time, explain all of this to me, Kathleen.
Well, what I'm going to say is slowing down does not mean we might not move quickly. It's a
Mm,
paradox. The
mm,
slowing down has to do with being open to being impacted. You can play that, and I saw that in you just then. You played that and you were listening. You were dancing with it. You were
mhm,
moving quickly, but you were allowing yourself to be impacted as you heard it. It wasn't that you just kind of went into this one um, idea of what it was going to be. It's funny if we looked back at the video when you quickly played through the Nightingale this last time,
mm,
you were more in that mind of just do it instead of
mhm,
really
mhm.
feeling it and
Right.
being impacted by it. So it's a paradox. The slowing down doesn't mean you might not play music quickly, or even that you might not have a very full schedule, but it has something to do with the quality of presence and that
Mm.
being open in the moment to what is in oneself and what is in the environment around you.
Yeah, as you say that, and I realize how that connects with sensuality, with the willingness to actually engage with the environment around you and to
Yes,
be vulnerable to
yes,
the sound, vulnerable to the feeling.
yes, yes, yes.
I think that's what Tony meant by being a victim of your own work.
I think so. I mean, that when we're vulnerable, we are impacted, and
Mm,
and and I think you've said this before, and I know I've spoken with writers who've said this before, and it's that recognition that if I put this down on paper this way today, 6 months from now, I may think, gosh, I would do it this way now. I would say it differently. That
mm,
we are evolving,
right.
but there is the power of the split second expression.
Right. And that's why I know we have to end in,
Yeah,
3 minutes, but that is the beauty of learning the fundamentals and the elementals. It's the beauty of having a blueprint instead of everything written out. It's the beauty of learning how to improvise on a
right.
motif or a structure or a tune. You're just making me realize why it's so important for me to teach the things that I teach, because I
Mhm.
learn so much more about them when I
Yes.
do that. And then
Yeah.
I can access them so much more in my life. So I'm going to take away the power of the split second. That
Mhm.
I'm going to take away that in any split second, I can make the choice to actually be impacted, to listen and love what I'm hearing, whether I'm playing the instrument or whether I'm sitting here or whether I'm touching a piece of paper, to actually be present and connected
Right.
versus getting aware of what I'm often doing, being afraid or avoiding or preventing or controlling or, all that stuff.
Right.
And making that the split second. And even if there's only one split second in a day when I can shift that to take that opportunity, that's what I'll take away.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And I'm going to hold simplicity as the key to being impacted. And that when I can, in the split second, allow myself to be with the most simple, fundamental, basic, essential,
Mm.
and let that impact me.
Mm. I love that. I love that because I'm constantly searching for simplicity. And so what I feel like you just gave me access to it in a way that I didn't have before,
Mm-hmm.
which is just find it in one moment, in one split second.
Right. Yeah.
So Kathleen, thank you so much. And everybody who watches as we're speaking and afterwards and writes to us, and I love your comments. Thank you so much for being part of this conversation. It's just such a joy to have it every week.
Yes. Yes.
And farewell, go forth and harp on magic in life.